Welcome. We are all set to dive into this panel discussion on delivering true business value through new age IT. In this panel session, we'll be discussing about how some of the large enterprises in the country are leveraging their current IT investments and before moving to the cloud, how are they looking at re-architecting apps, applications within the systems, and also how they're using data to maximize value internally as well as for their external customers. Before we begin, I would like to introduce our panel members. We have with us Deepak Sharma, who is the Chief Digital Officer of Kotak Mahindra Bank. We have Ravinder Singh, who is the Chief Information and Innovation Officer at Vistara. We have Mukesh Rathi, Senior VP and Global CIO of Dr. Reddy's Laboratories. And we have Amruta Joshi, JPAC Head of Strategic Cloud Engineering, Google. Welcome all of you. We'll open the discussion with how our enterprises and how your organization is looking to maximize IT investments before you move to the cloud. Deepak, we could start with you.
So I think fundamentally banks always looked at keeping things stable and steady because you just want operations to continue without any kind of disruption. Sure. And here when we talk about innovation, it needs a lot of experimentation, fail fast, working with a lot of partners who may not be large IT companies, so be nimble, be agile. And I think these two approaches itself are very different and at times probably quite opposite to each another. So I think as we look at the whole architecture, we said there is a run the bank, and which is more about looking at your core systems, looking at your data centers, looking at the reliability and uptime. But at the same time, how do we re-architect ourselves to be agile? And I think that's where the whole fundamental shift in terms of reimagining the IT architecture has come into play, where we are looking at stuff like microservices and APIs, or we are looking at a multi-channel strategy. We're looking at stuff like open banking to say not just how do we expose our APIs and build microservice, but also how do we consume external APIs in order to build and create new experience. So I think this is fundamentally a big shift from the way we were running. But at the same time, you are connected to the umbilical cord, which is your core systems, because nowhere you want to replace, but at the same time, you want to build certain layers, which helps you be more agile and can get you speed and to the market.
Right. Ravi?
So we don't have to reimagine anything. We were
so
born
you've started,
in cloud.
you've been born on the cloud.
We were born in cloud, and it was, trust me, it was the easiest decision. Two elements of it. One, I'm myself a cloud engineer, so I knew this thing pretty much. And second thing is that when you have to set up a business, or especially a business as tough as an airline in such a short span of time, then cloud becomes your natural choice. And it was a good decision, okay. So that's how it is different. So we were born in cloud, literally. Apart from having our core systems, we have made heavy bets on machines, okay, all kinds of machines, which comes with sensors and all that stuff. We are also very, very seasonal in nature, right? So seasonality means sometimes exponential computational growth, right? Which directly relates to the advent of cloud or the beauty of cloud. Machines, all kinds of machines, whether they are intelligent machines or they are machines which are related to sensors or run by sensors, again, humongous amount of data, which depends upon what you are trying to do with that. Are you trying to get data from an engine, or are you trying to get data and doing some kind of analytics based on your e-commerce platform, something like that. Again, cloud works in both these flavors. Third is from the pure futuristic investment perspective. We have made bets on machine learning and deep learning both. We have made heavy bets on robotics. Let's see what happens. And they just are necessary. And if you have to make them work, cloud almost becomes a necessity for you.
True.
So it's a pretty simple thinking.
Right. Mukesh, how have you been looking at the transition and utilizing your existing infrastructure first, and then maybe moving to the cloud model?
Sure. So unlike banks and airline, pharma's industry in general has been a laggard in the whole digitization game plan. That is one. Second, very heavy regulatory framework into which we need to operate. And hence, traditionally, whatever digitization has happened has been primarily on-premise, governed by a lot of regulation. There's this specific called Part 11 compliance, which you need to ensure about every system we do. Having said that, I think the regulators also now recognize the movement of cloud and what it brings in terms of capability. We internally now have created a cloud-first policy strategy from an architecture perspective. Having said that, from an infrastructure perspective, because we have existing investments, I think we look at that primarily when the refresh cycle comes up. And that is the best time to relook at our approach on infrastructure, and then wherever possible, wherever regulatory framework allows, we are moving into the cloud. From an applications perspective, I think the decisions are a lot more easier. Wherever there is possibility to move to a SaaS, we are preferring that to directly go there. Having said that, we for sure need to solve for the integrations between the SaaS applications we are picking up to the ERP and other base applications, which are our systems of record, for us to be able to move data up and down between the two. And that is the architecture problem which we are solving as we speak. And there's a lot of work we are doing in that space.
What kind of issues are you trying to address here when you talk of the architecture?
Yeah, so maybe I can sort of share an example. Yeah, so as a pharma company, we make a lot of documents, okay, and we need to store these documents with required electronic signatures and all that stuff if we are not doing physical. And there are these Part 11 compliance systems. There is one called Documentum, is what we use, where all these documents reside. Now, the way our operators are supposed to operate is they are supposed to look at a standard operating procedure and operate against that. Over the last few years, there have been several observations as part of FDA regulation that what is written in the procedure is different from what the operator is doing. And then the root cause of that, we figured out that these procedures are written several years back, very complex to understand, and for an operator who is probably not even a proper graduate, does not understand clear English, difficult for him to follow what is there. So we created one solution which we call as ISOP, which essentially simplifies this whole SOP structure, and then we've applied machine learning on that so that it actually reads every sentence to say what is the intent, whether it is an action, whether it is information, all of that stuff. Now for this we use Google TensorFlow, for us to be able to apply that machine learning. So all this ISOP solution is on the cloud, but needs to integrate with my Documentum solution, which is on premise, bound by all the regulations. And this is where we start facing those challenges, right? And so now we are talking to partners like Documentum, SAP, etc., so that how they can help us open up these APIs, so that this whole integration process becomes a lot more easier and smoother compared to what we went through in few of these experiments.
Right. Amruta, any opening views? You've heard all three speak about how they're looking at the current IT infrastructure before they move to the cloud. Ravi is already on, he's 100% on the cloud. So any opening views before I draw you into the other questions that we have?
No, absolutely. So your journey to the cloud is typically not one step. It's not like, okay, today I am on an on-premise infrastructure and boom, overnight I'm now on the cloud. It doesn't go that way. You have a lot of choices along the way. You may have critical connected applications that you want to keep on your legacy infrastructure for now, maybe because you have existing agreements in place. Now to actually make that leap, you could actually start doing a lot of things. I think some of the things that Deepak mentioned, start looking at your applications that are monolithic or that have too many dependencies, start re-architecting them, build that cloud muscle in your team, so that when the time comes to switch, it is a much easier jump over to the cloud. I think all of us pretty much recognize this, that in future, we all want to be on the cloud. We want most of our data, most of our analytics, all of our applications to be there. So even if it's a journey that you're going to make, the 100% leap will happen a few years from now, there are many things that you could do right now to make that transition happen. Plus, whatever new applications you're architecting, you could build them in a cloud-native fashion. Instead of just going with a lift and shift kind of approach, if you are already a cloud-native or if you've built applications that are cloud-ready, you're going to see that full potential of the cloud benefits once you move. So a lot of things that you could do right now, even if you aren't making that jump right away.
Right. So, broadly speaking, when we move to the cloud, it requires a lot of infrastructure change, and not if one starts from scratch on the cloud. How do you are looking at re-architecting apps? What is the approach that one needs to take when it comes to re-architecting the apps and moving it to the cloud?
So I think that's a good question, and that's what probably I would draw from there. So the way we are looking at things in our context is that obviously there is a security and there is a commercial dynamics, but most important is what's the implementation roadmap and timeline. Intent is one part. I think you can't do lift and shift. So I think we had to break it in phases, and the way we looked at it is in three parts again. We said anything new that we are doing today, we evaluate and say, are these applications cloud ready? So I think that's the first. So don't add anything in the system today which is not designed for cloud. The choice of whether to deploy it on cloud or not is something which is independent of whether applications are cloud ready. Right. So I think that's the first part of it. The second part of it is which all applications today we can move to cloud in order to drive better efficiency, or where we have probably a demand or a volume unpredictability, and then we get advantage because of the certain inherent issues or challenges as we face today. The third, which is the toughest of all, is that how do you go back and re-architect some of your core, and which is not something you're going to do overnight, but then obviously there is a time period. And there again, look at the most difficult ones, probably keep it aside. Don't try and change the entire firm
at one go.
But start looking at stuff. So for example, anything for layer of innovation for us is cloud. Anything which we are doing in a pre-prod, or if we want to do something in UAT, or we want to start testing certain things, that can move to cloud. Anything which is pre-customer acquisition journeys, now that is much easier to move to cloud. So I think the whole idea is balancing between risk and security concerns, looking at obviously things that is still doing well and you don't need to change, but then there is so much more you can move. And I think as we start seeing from a 10% to a 20 to 30, my guess is probably in a few years' time you will see more than 50% of applications running on cloud. And I think that would be the inflection point when you will be able to move and pull the rest.
So you've been using the AI piece, I believe. That's on the cloud. That's a
So innovation part was much easier. That's what I said. So
right.
Because this was non-existent. So, and second, when you work with the partners in this space, all of them, and for some of them, their solutions are only on
the cloud.
Only on cloud.
Right.
So I think there the choice was much simpler. But any new application that we are looking at today, they are all basically we are looking at from cloud context.
Right. Mukesh, your thoughts on this?
Sure. So I would actually build on top of what Deepak said. And as I mentioned, we sort of try to apply this cloud-first strategy to everything new we are trying to do. The measure we apply is, while from an overall perspective, I would be maybe 20% on the cloud. We like to see every year, end of the year, whatever new I did last year, what percentage of that I did on the cloud, right? And there, at least we want to be 70% plus. Largely, we've been there from the last a couple of years. I would just sort of like to come back to the other point. See, given the compliance hangover, there are few of my applications which will continue to remain on-premise at least for the next 3 to 5 years, the way I look at it. A manufacturing execution system application will be in the plant. A laboratory information system will be in the plant. Having said that, I want to now innovate on top of these. So as we speak, I am currently running a program to run RPA engine on top of my laboratory information management system, so that the whole process of review can, from manual to become 100% automated. Now that piece will run on the cloud. And hence the whole problem to solve is the API economy, the internal API economy which I need to build on top of my existing monolithic large applications, so that they have the ability to integrate and consume what is available on the cloud. And that is the big infrastructure come architecture problem which we are solving as we speak. I don't have a direct answer to it right now. It is in the works. There are a few places we've done point solutions.
What are the issues, Mukesh, if I may ask, what are the issues when it comes to these areas?
So the problem is many of these monolithic pharma-specific applications, they are not API ready. And hence, so the whole equation begins by first having conversations with them to be able to create those APIs. Right. Okay, and I mean, SAP after so many years has last year now come up with API integration layer. I mean, one of the largest ERPs used in the world, and we were the first to lap it up and see now how we can start, at least integrating with all the other innovations which we have always been wanting to do on top of our ERP. So those are the primary type of challenges. The second part is, again, let me give a little specific example. So after we do analysis of a sample, after all the tests are done, there is a reviewer who actually checks, and that's required by the governance, regulatory governance, that there is a maker and a checker. And the checker checks everything, whether all the tests were done as expected, did I follow all the rules which were given, did I follow the SAP, and then I cleared. Now I'm trying to do a robotic process automation to remove the checker. Now this would again need an approval, because all of a sudden to the regulator, now I'm saying I'm replacing a human with a robot. So even those are other type of challenges from an innovation perspective when it comes to using some of this. Having said that, we are 100% clear that all these innovations by default have to be on the cloud. That is the way you will have to move forward. And that is the journey we are on.
Right, right. Ravi, in your case, since you don't have legacy within your IT infrastructure, how are you looking at the app architecture, and how easy or how difficult it is to address re-architecting of apps when it comes to moving to the cloud?
So I have a different definition of cloud. A portion of cloud is a legacy to me.
That's
the emergence. If you actually look at emergence of machines, and just for the simplicity, if I call it as a virtual machines, right? Some of the virtual machines are inherently by their definition becoming very intelligent, right? So there's and how you write. So but in an architecture world, okay, refactoring of two things, refactoring of infrastructure and refactoring of system of records are one of the most difficult problems to solve. They are so difficult that even if you have your ERPs, or let's say system of records for revenues or system of records for operations or cost even on cloud, just to refactor that particular platform is a very, very difficult thing. Okay, both from how you get money for it, both how much time it takes. So I agree with everyone. And refactoring of infrastructure, it becomes both a political game. It becomes a capex versus opex game. It becomes sign-offs from multiple levels, sometimes even up to the board. So from the non-technology perspective, just from the philosophy of refactoring of infrastructure and system of records is not an easy thing, even though it sounds. What I have felt directly in the context of what you have put over there is how you write code. How you write code on cloud is remarkably different than how you write code on a monolithic stack. Just a simple thing, if you're writing an e-commerce app, and how you do session management for that, if you don't take care that your application on cloud and how those sessions are going to be managed and how those states are going to be managed, you can actually do tremendous disservice, and especially if this is a revenue generation platform. So three things I would say: refactoring, be very careful about refactoring. If you're refactoring infrastructure, and these are difficult problems to solve from every angle. And if you are on cloud, then the art of writing code, and it's pure art of writing code, it changes dramatically. And if you bring the complexity of data, and as you have mentioned, AI and AI based on pure
analytics,
then it becomes much more complex, because your data doesn't reside on one cloud.
It's across. Right.
And I may choose one particular stack for let's say infrastructure as service for one cloud type, and SaaS brings us another complexity.
Right.
APIs acts as a glue, but that's a very romantic way of putting things. In the actual world, when you actually write code, and you write code over integration layer, it introduces. So coding and refactoring are two things which I would say.
Right. Amruta, so there are challenges, when it comes to re-architecting apps. What is the Google approach, and how are you trying to address these specific areas? And Ravi, I was also shocked when he said, 4 years into cloud, and he's still finding it challenging. So, your views.
No, I'm first of all really happy at the mix of panelists we have here, because we really get a different view, and we see all of these things happening with different enterprises that we work with at Google. So again, we're never going with the one size fits all. That's not the strategy. Now, if you think about moving to the cloud, there are two sets of benefits. One is the auto scaling and the cost and all of that, which seems like the most attractive piece if you look at business decision making. But there is a second piece which is also very valuable, which is the agility, the CI/CD, the continuous integration, continuous deployment, that piece, which is not appreciated as much. Now, if you go with a lift and shift kind of migration, you think you're going to get all of those benefits. It's like the shortcut that you take to quickly get there, but shortcuts don't always pay off. So depending on the complexity of your application, that may not give you the full benefit of the cloud. And that's where the re-architecting comes into picture. Right. Now, even with re-architecting, there are many layers at which you could re-architect. The less coupled you are to the underlying infrastructure, the more cloud ready, the more agile you are. So again, it can be a decision that you make okay, do I want to, at the minimum layer, I think virtualization is something that we see. I believe many enterprises in India have that virtualization. About 80% have that virtualization layer accomplished. So kudos, step one. But again, there's a lot we could do on top of this. The next layer we could look at is containerization. So with containerization, you have a certain level of portability for your applications, and then moving to the cloud will be easier. It will also be, it will also give you the full benefit. And then at the third level, I think as we saw, you will start to think about how to write a cloud native application, which is quite different if you want to have the absolute full benefit. So you need not choose complete re-architecting every time or complete rewriting, but depending on where you are and what kind of application it is, what kind of business impact you want to see, you can choose what level of re-architecting is right for you. And sometimes, if it's a really simple application, maybe lift and shift could just work. So again, I'm not recommending just you always have to re-architect. Re-architecting does give you the benefit. But just look at the spectrum of options. Seriously consider containerization, because that does make you cloud ready in some sense.
Right. Any views, Mukesh?
I completely agree. Right? Completely agree with what you said, including the DevOps chain. I believe tend to be a lot more smoother, faster, easier when we are on the cloud compared to when we are trying to do the same on-premise. So.
A final point of discussion is around data, and data is very critical, both internally for the business and for the customer experience that everybody wants to create. So Deepak, how are you looking at data and trying to maximize value for your business, for your customers, and internally as well? Are trying to get insights, are trying to use cloud for that? How are you looking at maximizing value of data?
So I think we see data both as an opportunity, but it's also a responsibility, especially in financial service, because the way we consume data, both our own proprietary data and also some of the other external data stack, I think it brings in tremendous amount of responsibility. And when I said about cloud or any initiative that we look at it, I think one of the lens that we apply, and we apply it very, very closely, is about the risk part of it. And I think that's where a lot of times there are certain intent because of either we don't have the complete understanding of what is the imminent risk in medium to long term. Some of the decisions we keep on hold and say, let's pick up the easy ones first. Where we
so being more responsible with data, so that's the way if we can look at it.
Absolutely. So I think that's why when we looked at even initiative, we said, what are the applications, what are the kind of database we are okay to put on cloud, and which are the ones which is clearly a no-no. And I think that right now that divide still in the banking and financial service, I would say, stays. And second is, if you see globally, and I've been waiting for all the cloud providers I talk to, I haven't seen any large bank globally moving a core banking kind of a stuff to cloud. It hasn't happened globally yet. Okay, so we are waiting for someone to take that first big leap. We obviously see a new age banks which probably are moving on the core, but they are not one of those major ones. So I think that's something which again brings in some amount of reluctance, I would say. Even if there is intent, there is a lack of readiness to move that. I think where we are seeing from data to put a lot of stuff is where, for example, we have set up our developer sandbox, where we have masked certain data fields. We encrypt, we put those data for our partners, developers, fintechs to start testing out, put their codes, and submit those applications for production access and rights. But I think this, in my view, will continue to become one of the most clear competitive advantage for firms, not of moving to cloud or not moving, but how do they guard the data and how do they build their business model around privacy. And I think that's what we are mindful at Kotak. And we are happy to work, talk to partners who can help us solve this. The data strategy is independent, but since you're looking at taking a decision of what to move to cloud and not to move to cloud.
That's where
when security becomes one of the key parameters to take this decision, how data would get treated, what are the data privacy concerns that arises out of cloud, because
and the regulations.
There is obviously a strong set of, I would say, opinion that anything which is in your captive data center is more safe than anything you put in cloud. And I said this is something which has to be solved for with clear logic, argument as to how we can bring in probably the same amount of privacy, safeguards, everything as we look at moving some of our critical components to the cloud.
Yeah. I would let her speak. Okay. I totally disagree with that argument that the private data centers are secure than cloud.
No, I said maybe there is a perception. I didn't say that. See, there, as you
so there are varied perceptions, yes. Deepak,
so that has to be solved for.
But as he was speaking, actually, we've sort of taken a completely maybe contrarian approach to data. So data for us, again, if I were to sort of separate out, we don't collect, as a pharma company, we don't collect patient data and doctor data and all of that stuff. So I'm keeping that out. So for me, data is primarily my internal data, my R&D data, manufacturing data, my sales data, all of that stuff. And there, so we are on to a data lake creation journey as we speak. And there we've taken a decision to be fully on cloud. So as we speak, I'm putting all my data onto the cloud, onto a singular data lake. Whole intent being we're sort of able to connect all the data points together to drive insights and be ready for as all these various ML algorithms emerge and sort of become more prominent. I should be ready to sort of get insights out of these as we speak. One important thing I want to share is while there's a lot of focus across the world around the next set of algorithms and what they can do, I think even we had the session from Professor Pullak today morning, and even the weak AI, we are as we speak, we are struggling to use the weak AI, because you first need to clean the data, make the data available for weak AI. So that's what we are solving. We are trying to clean the data, and we are trying to put it all onto the data lake, and that is where we want to then start using these various algorithms to drive the next level of insights. There are some pilots, proof of concepts we are running, and we are seeing some early success. So very excited about the journey as of now.
I still remember one statement. It's like torturing the data to reveal its true intent. So that's if I may, right? Amruta, we have short on time, and can you just say how Google is looking at data and what kind of value are you providing to enterprises, and maybe wind up the whole conversation as well.
So at Google, data is sacred. We're very particular about every aspect of data, not just about regulation and compliance, but we hold ourselves to a very high standard with security, privacy, taking care of the user, making sure it is stored securely, making sure we are able to extract these insights with our AI and ML framework without, going against any of our key values and principles. Now, if you're a technology company that is willing to invest that much time and energy into building all these things yourself, I mean, Google has invested 20 years, more than 20 years of research, very deep research into this area. So if you have that kind of a muscle and you feel confident you can build it out at that level, then sure, maybe your private data center is going to be good enough. But if you look at it, it's more like let the experts do the job at what they're good at. So I kind of believe with Mukesh's point of view over here, that's where it's going to be in the future. It will be a little bit of a journey for people to come around, but investing in data moving data to the cloud will definitely be where all of us will end up sooner or later.
Right. I think, we've short on time, and I'll have to end this conversation here. It was a pleasure talking with all our panel members, and thank you all for your candid views and sharing your thoughts with us. Thank you.
Thank you.